will get started in a simplistic way. Let's say in yesterday's session, we have understood that we can create a normal class. Let's say I'm creating a class, public class. At that time, just we have understood public means anyone can call the class by creating the object. So let's say I'm creating public class student, and in that I'm just creating few things. So something like public string first name, public string last name. Okay, let's say just this thing where I'm creating. Okay, and this is my main class from where, let's say, I'm starting execution. Okay, so as it's a main class from where everything is getting started, your main method public static void main should be over here. Okay, in that I'm creating the object of this student stu equals to new student, and let's say I'm just printing, or I'm just assigning something like stu dot first name equals to abc, and let's say I'm printing as well system dot out dot print stu dot first name equals to stu dot first name. This thing will work, right? This is some of the things that we have seen last time, right? In this way, the class can be created, the methods can be there, right? And this is what we have seen is with Java in a simplistic way, correct? Now, if you want to understand in terms of C++, correct, let's say, then in C++ and Java, there'll be minor difference. Can anyone tell what would be in terms of classes, or in terms of what you can say, how the class should be defined over here, and how it will start running? In a simplistic way, it will be something like this. Over here, it will be same way. Class student, we can have public as an access specifier. Okay, over here you can define your variables, methods, and you can close it. Then a method, if you see, it's an outside of this class. Integer main method you can define. So over here it's inside main because it's a main class, and from there only. So anything in Java should be wrapped inside class. You cannot put anything abruptly outside. So for that, for example, let's say if I take a C++ compilers example that we have seen last time. Okay, over here, if I take up any language outside, even integer max or integer main, that's fine. Why? Because the compiler starts running the program from integer main. Now, if the same thing I want to check into what you can say Java, then let's say IDEO1 Java. Just opening IDEO1 Java compiler. Online compiler we are using because most of the time, if you are not using IDEO, any tools, something like IntelliJ or Visual Studio or something, this online compilers will be fastest for you to check out whether your syntax will work or not when you're doing whiteboarding session, or when you are writing some programs for online competition and all that. So that's why having a practice of that. So if you see over here, they have also created a class IDEO1. This is the main class from where the execution will start. Now this name, you can create anything. Just like in our session, in our example, we have taken class student. The main class will have the main method. No two class will have main method. And wherever the main method will be, from there, the code will get started. Now, if I want to create a different class over here, let's say student, I can create. Make sense? And I can reuse that in case if it's a public protected and in that definitions. Okay. So this is what just how the class should be created. This is what we have seen so far. Make sense? Now, so in this, what we can say, do you have any doubt so far? This is pretty simple. We have been seeing such kind of things so far, so I don't think so there should be any.
Sir, we can't repeat two mains.
No.
In one class. Okay. In different classes also.
No.
Okay.
So main is the one from where the compiler will understand from where to start. Correct. So that's why it's not possible to have multiple mains. Give me a minute. Huh? Along with that, we were telling that in JavaScript also the functionality can be similar one. Can be similar one. Let's say for the JavaScript, if we want to understand, correct, how it can be the access specifiers and what all the things can be there in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, you can create your class similar to this. Let me just erase this. You can understand. You can create, let's say you are creating class student in a simplistic way. Okay. Let's say some static variables you are creating. We'll take it up what is static and all. Let's say static first name and all the things you are creating. Okay. Now, whatever the static you are putting, they are class specific. Now, apart from static, anything that you create will be public. By default, that will be public. Now, if you want to create anything in a private or protected access specifier, as I was telling, it should be defined with hash, okay, and something like this, some information regarding student you want to create, okay, then it can be specified with the private, correct, like private student info. So this variable will be private. Now, how private, public, and protected will be used, let me cover it up. But it's just an example that how access specifier in JavaScript can be used and how it can be defined in other language. Second thing over here, the methods will be simple to create, like something like uh, get first name. That's it. You don't have to give much of the logic like public static void main or public static or anything. By default, they are public methods. You can use it. Correct. So in that way, we can use the methods as well in JavaScript if you want to create a class. Simple. So hash private for private and underscore protected for protected. So in that way, we can define. So now we know how to define in Java as well or C++ as well access specifier. Like you can have methods like private, some method name or variable name as private first name. For an example, private string first name in this way. And in C++, in a section like public section you have created, and in that whatever will come, they will be public. New section you create private, in that whatever will come, that will be private. So in that way, it will work. Where to use that? To understand that, we'll have to understand how the class objects are being used with each other. Correct. Once we can understand how the class objects are created, how it can be used outside of the class or in superclass or in subclass, if we understand this relationship, then it will be easy for us to understand that where or which method should be private, public, or protected, and how we can use them. If I take this thing first, and I wouldn't have taken this just like in colleges, we will not understand exactly where to use which one. So, in a simplistic way, let's cover these things first, relationships with classes, and then understand this one. Okay, let's get started. Let's say I'm creating two classes. Okay, let's say main class or a first class that I'm creating is something like this class print info. Just an example. Okay, in which I'm writing down something like this public static void main. Okay, and that is taking arguments string And over here, whatever we want to print, that will come up. Okay. Now let me take it up the same thing over here into code. Just start code. Okay. Something like this is the main class idea1. Okay, in which public static void main string arguments throws Java exception if you don't want to take. You do it's fine if you don't want to. Exception we are throwing whenever some error comes. So let's say we are writing it down. Even if we don't write it down, it's fine. Main code goes here. Okay. Now let's say we are creating a class of student. Okay. And for example, let's say I'm creating public string first name. Okay. An example I'm just giving. Let's say the generally we do not use something like this. And public string last name equal to, okay, that's it. Let's say we are using just this. Now, how do we use the class? How do we use the object? And what is the relationship between two? Right now, as it's a simple class, okay, and I have used public specifier, it can be used from anywhere. Now, why I'm in explanation of a class relationship, I'm just explaining public because public is something like it can be used from anywhere. For protected and private are something different. To understand them, we need to understand the class relationship. So that's why I'm talking about public together so that understanding this can be perfect and then we can take it up further. Now, over here, when you have to create a class, as it's a public class, correct? You can simply create something like this, student, let's say stu equal to stud or stu equals to new. New is the keyword for which or this can be used to create any new instances or new objects. Whenever you are creating new string, at that time also we will use new in Java. In C++, simply you can use a different nomenclature. We'll take it up that as well. But let's understand just a relationship, students to new. And let's say I'm just printing system dot out dot println, okay, and just name equals to stu dot first name plus last. That's it. So that should print my name. Copy it and run it. So here there is in normal classes, in this one it's not allowing it or what. Isn't public static void main? There's some problem with this, it seems like. Okay, let me start a different compiler. Otherwise, if we create public student, it should be fine on. Not sure. No worries. Let me just start. Let's say
Because of line number 18, like we are doing stu first name plus last name. Shouldn't we put stu dot last name?
sorry. Investiness. I forgot that part. I don't think so. It should be student dot first name because it's telling that over here public class should be defined and declared in this one. Let's say if I change the main, is it required main should be there? Not sure though. Acha, this was not given. Yeah. Acha. There should be something else. This should it's a simply it should run. Some online compiler issue. Let me take a look and let me find it out what is coming up over here. The main new main class you are creating, that's perfectly fine. and system.out.println name equals to student.first name. In a simplistic way, it should run. It should y or some.
You can try doing that as stu dot. We can just have first name plus last name.
Not sure. Okay, let me get back to you for this within 2-3 minutes. But meanwhile, we'll start understanding rest of the concept. Then I'll start letting this code work. Okay. Meanwhile, let's go over here. No worries. We'll see what's wrong there. Okay. So first thing first, in a simplistic way, let's say we understand key of a class can be created. Let's say a class student, and as we have created it as in a public class, the object of this can be created from a different class, which is our main class. Let's say not public, but let's say class main. And over here, you have public static void main. And in that, you can create an object. How to create an object? As I say, student 2. The student is a class name. The type for this object. The object is of stu, but of type which? The student type. And equals to new student. In this way, it should be created. Now, let's say we want to understand key.
One doubt. Sometimes the same line we even call it like creating a new instance of the class. Like what is the difference between like class and object? Sorry, instance and object.
So instance and object, I would say they will be used in a nomenclature normally. If you want to understand, or your question is regarding interface.
I didn't get that.
So what is exactly your question?
Like this line, right? Student S2 equals to new student. So we are creating instance, right? Like we sometimes call it like instance of the class, and sometimes also like object. Like what is the difference between that?
So generally we use object and instance of an instance of a class as interchangeably, kind of interchangeably, in the sense sometimes we use word object, sometimes we use word instance. There is no kind of a difference between instance or object in normal nomenclature. Normal nomenclature in the sense when you're talking with your peers in company, when you are discussing with your uh, lead or someone, generally it's not in a difference. It's similar to if I say, okay, let me clear some of the things. Like in Java, we are calling everything as like object. Why? Because it's an object oriented program. Everything in the sense whatever we create. Now in the same way, do you call Java method or function? They both are same, right? A function is also something like, let's say, calculate. And over here also a public static, whatever access specifier you want to give, and the method name inside the class, right? Every method should be inside the class. Here you will say method. Why? There is no difference between them. But function we call when generally we are using with C++ or C, right, where the function can be outside of the classes. And when we are using a Java program where object-oriented fundamentals are tightly used, correct, we call this as method only. So in that way, if I say method or a function, it should be same, correct? And in the same way, when I say instance of an object, instance of a class, or an object of a class, they are used as interchangeably. But which one to use it? What should be the right nomenclature? The right nomenclature is object.
Here I heard that the variables declared inside a class is also known as instance variable, and in the main
No, I'm talking
method.
about instance in the sense instance of a class. So let's say if I'm creating student stu equals to new student. This is also called instance and object as well. This is what I'm talking about. instance variable, class variable, they both are same. It's just how you call them in general nomenclature or in general practices. Okay, further, let's say we want to understand furthermore in the sense what are the which what we can say, or the class variables, I would say, or methods, who can use that. Okay, so let's say class variables and methods that can be used outside of class in a different class. It can be used by creating an object of that, just like we have used student2 equals to new and stu dot first name. In such a way we are using that, correct? So in this way it can be used. Also, the variables and methods can be used inside the class if you have the method over there, something like getter method or setter method. We'll take it up the example of get and set and all that, correct? Now there can be a, a logic, I would say, something like superclass and subclass. Let's understand that. First, do anyone wants to have what is the definition of a superclass and subclass?
Yes.
Just a minute, huh? Please show. Sorry, my daughter was coming up. Okay, where were we? Yeah. What is superclass and subclass? And what is the relationship between them? Anyone wants to try it out? Someone?
I think superclass is parent
Sorry?
and parent class is also necessary.
Kind of a parent class, but in a simplistic way. Okay, if we want to understand subclass and superclass generally called a parent class, okay, and subclass is generally called a child class. What does that differences mean, and what is their relationship, and how we can understand them for the protected and all that things? We'll see that. Generally, what we understand is we inherit. Inherit, that means, let's say, whatever the properties of a parent. I'm talking about real world scenario. Okay, child inherits. Let's say they have multiple children, then also all child inherits that property. Same thing happens over here. If you have parent class, the child class can inherit their properties. And over here in normal world, property means assets, physical world assets. And in Java, the properties are what? Generally methods or variables. Now, if I take a very simple example, in a very simplistic example, if I take, if I want to, yesterday we were creating different classes, like whatever the real world objects are there, like as I was telling, like let's say you want to create car as an object, yes you can. And along with the car, if I want to create something like what we can say, the type of car, let's say Hyundai, also it's an object. And if I create I-20, then also it's an object, because they all are real world objects. Now when you are creating object, when you are creating a program out of it for something, let's say car parking system or anything, correct, you have to create some relationship between all. Now let's say you are creating a parking system design and you have to create some objects. What you will think it as an object? Will you create an I-20 as in a different object, different class, and Hyundai is in a different class? Then in that way there will be multiple classes. You won't do that. What you'll do generally, you'll create a vehicle as class, okay, and car as class. Now in that you probably will have some type of cars or some other things over here. Okay, like brand, what is a brand name, what is a type of car, hatchback or sedan or something. In that way the all the cars will be defined, because one car has a property, what is its brand name, and one car has a property, what is its car name. and one car has a property. What is its type? Hatchback, sedan, or SUV, or something mini SUV, and all that. So in that way, you are creating a relationship, something like this. All the type of vehicles which I want to put it into my parking slot, those will be defined under vehicle, and all the cars that goes in my parking spot, they all are cars, type of cars. Now, what is the relationship between these two? The relationship is that the vehicle or the car is type of vehicle. Now is a and all that relationship of objects we are not going into, but is a type of car. So in a parent child relationship, if we want to understand, we can understand that class vehicle, I want to create it as parent class, and I want to create my another class, let's say car, as my child class. And when I create a parent child relationship, something like superclass and subclass relationship, then I have to define it that car uses which class as its parent. So car extends properties of vehicle, and that's why the relationship of vehicle and car is defined as superclass and subclass. Now let's say over here in vehicle, um, let's say, yeah, in vehicle, I'm creating something like the car can be parked. Okay, so the method over here I'm using is, let's say, park. So car can be parked. Now in park logic, something I'll use, something, whatever the business logic of car parking I want to create, time I want to store, and all the things I'll use over here. But do I have to define everything over here? No. Why? Because based upon the type of car, probably my calculation will get different. Probably, right? So all that business logic will come over here. All that business logic will come over here. And there I can create all the logic. Now, over here, if I have used some variable name, let's say the type of vehicle, let's say string type of vehicle, this type of vehicle, correct? This type of vehicle I can access from here. By which way? Let's say car object I'm creating into, let's say, public static void main, and in that I'm not writing everything. Let's say in public static void main I'm creating my object as car equals to new capital car. And if I do something like this car dot, let's say in public state println car dot type of vehicle, if I do that, it will be printed. Let's say by default over here type of vehicle, let's say I'm giving something like that, let's say uh, sedan by default, that can be printed over here. That means I can use the methods, use the variables over here in my subclass. It extends the properties. I can also define my method park over here, which is based upon the type of car and all the business logic over here. If it is not defined, and if I call the method, let's say car dot park, it will directly say that, okay, in this car dot park is not there, then go and find it out into superclass, and then that will be executed. So in that way, your superclass and subclass relationship can be created. It's in its simplistic. Now, along with that, let's understand the access specifier. Why? Because when we understand the parent-child relationship of a class, then we can understand where the protected can be used. So if we want to understand protected in a simplistic way, protected methods are the method or protected variables or method, anything, okay? They can be used in a same package. We'll talk about what is package, okay? But if you don't want to understand in same package, in a simplistic way, it can be used in subclass. Now, let's go back and understand where in subclass it can be used. So if I'm creating a class vehicle, okay, and I'm creating, let's say, protected, simply car, okay, and it can be parked, so public void, and it can be parked. And if I create a class over here, something like class car extends vehicle, and in that, let's say I'm writing down public static void main string arguments, and I'm creating my object as, let's say, car, or let's say new car. Okay. Now if I do something like this car dot park, as it was public, it will work because the method park over here was defined as public void park, correct? And over here, protected string type of vehicle car I have created, correct? In a class, in a simply way, car vehicle. Now if I do something like system.out.println, and in that I do love something like car dot type of vehicle, then if you see this type of vehicle is protected, then it will allow it. Then it will allow it. Why? Because it is subclass who is calling the object, or sorry, calling the instance or a method or a variable, either a method or a variable which is protected, then it's fine. Public it can be, but protected, then it should be in a or in a same class, or it can be in a same class. So over here also, if there is some protected variable, I can use that without creating an object. But if I do not create this relationship, that means this car is different, or this object is different and this object is different, there is no relationship between them, then this will throw that you cannot call any protected member of a class outside its scope. So that's why we have to use inheritance in the sense parent-child relationship to use the protected members. So in that way, we understood that three fundamentals or topics. We understood what is inheritance, how we are using it, what is parent-child relationship, and how a protected or where protected can be used. Make sense? So far clear? Where a protected can be used. Now, let's understand about private. Or before that, I'll just pause and I'll just ask everyone if you guys have any question.
Protected can be used for variables as well as method, and
Yes.
class also.
Class also you can create protected, but generally we do not use it. Why? Because the classes can be used for the relationship. But if you want to create, well, why you'll create a protected class?
Instead of declaring variables and method as protected, I'll just declare class as protected. So directly we can access all entire class through child class.
So generally, we do not use it with the class. The reason because of that is the protected methods and variables can be used outside of the class. To use those outside of the class only if there is a relationship. That's the first. That's why it will not be used with the class. Like protected class will not create. First thing. Second thing. Private class, if you want to create, you may, or a public class, if you want to create, you can, but not that.
And how can we know that this variable should be protected and this variable should be private?
Exactly. Which one we should define it? That is based upon business logic. So when we'll understand, I'll talk about inheritance, okay, encapsulation, all the object-oriented fundamentals, and where those should be kept protected or why. Why generally gets followed by the logic of relationship with the classes or the business logic. So that thing will cover with the OOPS fundamental, how or why the protected and everything came up, right? Public, private, protected, why those things came up. But to understand those, we need to just simply understand the relationship. Once we understand the relationship with the subclass, superclass, and all that things, understand the parent, what you can say, public, private, protected. Then if we understand the OOPS concepts, there wherever we use it, based upon the business logic and why, then it will be much more clear to you guys. So that's why right now, to answer your question, it will be based upon business logic. And once it is clear what that business logic means, X per the understanding of OOPS concept, I'll take it up. Key how you can think about which objects, or I won't say objects, which variables to be created as protected, or which methods should be created as protected, and how actually we should use it. This is also not a good way to use it, okay? But right now, just for understanding, I am explaining that, okay? Now,
And programmers should figure out like how the business logic be communicated from senior engineer. They will guide us, or we have to read all the logic and we have to segregate
okay,
like classes and all that, or someone will tell us
no
make
one
this
will
class.
tell you. No one will tell you. As probably a junior engineer, someone will guide you. Ki you should have this many classes or something. So generally, what happens when you when you join in industry, rest of the objects, or I would say the whole picture would be clear to you. Ki in which way the instances are running, in which way the what we can say services are running, everything will be there. Initially, the first task of yours, initially, what it will be to solve some bug. Say, for example, I'm not getting first name properly. Let's say, for example. So when you are solving the bug, you'll understand the relationship where the first name is stored, in which class it is stored, what is its parent class, how it is being used, in which design pattern this whole relationship is defined, in which way it is defined. So when you're debugging this, just a debugging, when you do this, you'll understand all these things. As in a first should be the first task of an engineer, generally. And when you are debugging, you'll understand this. Then after few bugs you solve, your initial first task will be write a method or change a method somewhere over here to do some logic, or somewhere over here to do some logic. Once you do that, you'll be given a task in which a new class or object you need to create, and then you have to such that it fits into your design patterns and something. So in that way it will be taken. Now let's say if you have understood this, the existing patterns, even if someone doesn't tell you in which way the class should be created or what class should be created in your industry, you can. Why? Because you have understood the existing patterns and everything. Correct? Business logic says what? My first name should be stored into DB by segregating whatever the name I'm getting from upstream and store it into the object of first name and last name. In case the guy doesn't have last name, then store it null. This is your business logic. You have to define that a first name or a last name, should I keep a protected or not? You have to finalize it. You have to create that logic out of what business logic is given. Because it's your service, the protection of your data is your responsibility. That will come up with the object-oriented fundamentals, that in which way they are being used. But let's see that. Now, what is private access modifier? We saw protected, we saw public, and protected can be used with subclasses. So before that, we understood what are the parent-child relationship of the class, what is the superclass, what is the subclass, when I call a method of subclass, in that how it can be executed. If the method is not there into subclass, how it will try to find it out the method of a superclass. That things we understood. And this superclass subclass relationship is called generally inheritance. So that also we understood in a simplistic way. In our object oriented fundamentals like OOPS concept, I'll take it up once more. Now, what is private access specifier? So private access specifiers are some that can be used only within class. Public, if you understand anywhere. Private from subclasses, same package. But private variables are only from the class itself. If I take an example in a simplistic way, let's say I'm creating a method, let's say public class student. In that, I'm creating private string first name equals to ABC and private string last name equals to PQR. Correct? Then only some method, let's say, for example, if I'm taking, let's say print name. So then this print name can only print first name and last name, can only access first name and last name. Any method which is inside this can only access this first name and last name because they are created as private. How it will be used? Let's say in this, how it will be used. And if I create public static void main, then how it can be used? Let's say public static void main is in this class, then how it can be used? And if it is not in public static void main, in some other method, how it can be used? Any idea? Okay. So in a simplistic way, if let's say print name I want to do, then let's say system.out.println. If I do first name plus space last name, it will work without anything. If you want to change the value of first name, you can do that. Let's say you are creating a method name called, let's say, change name. Just an example, change name. Then this dot first name you can do as something else. Okay, by logic, let's say you are passing what name you want to change. Let's say instead of ABC you want to do something like string str. So that str or str will be created your first name. Let's say you are passing something like dd, the dd will get created as this. So you are using an object or a type called this. When I say this, that means this is a keyword which will refer to current object. Whatever the object you have created, for that this will be used. So in case, let's say you have created multiple objects, the multiple names you can reset and first name and last name you can set for that object. Okay. If I do just system.out.println, it will do that. Let's say you want to get the names, then you can just return first name. You can use that. So with just variables, it can be used like this. Now, if it is having a public static void main, obviously you have to create an object of this. Student stu equals to new student, and you can use stu dot first name either in printing or some calculation. So the private can be used inside only of this whole class. If I have some private variables, how can I call, or how can I what we can say, use these variables outside? Can I use these variables outside?
So you can't use.
Okay. So that's why we are creating these methods. If you have seen, I have created 3 methods. What were 3 methods? I have created in private, whatever the class I have created in student. One was print name. One was set name. Okay. And one was what? Get name. Something like this. Right. In general, these 2 types are called getter and setter. What is getter and setter? So getter are the methods which will get the variables which are private, and setters are the methods which will set the new variables with a name or whatever the arguments that you pass as setters. So now if I create a simply class something like this, public class student, in a simplistic example, let's say private string, the student's name, okay, student's name, just a name, and getter method, I'm creating something like this, get the name, right? So let's say public. Now this should be public so that it can be called from outside. Get name of a student, and it will return me just the student name, right? It should work. The setters, however, can be in a different way. Let's say public. Now the setter should be void because you are not returning anything. If you are returning, the type of return should be here. Setter generally do not return anything because it sets the value, right? So as I told, you have to use keyword this to say that this is the one. So public student name equals to anything new name. Now that new name you can pass it over here in argument, something like string new name of a student. So then new name. Let's say in this way, if you have written your class, okay, then your main object, let's say you are creating something like this, public class main. I'm writing the name main so that you can understand that over here there is a public static void main method. Okay, otherwise just like for IDO1 we were using, it has to be IDO1 in IDO1 compiler. Okay, they have created their own logic over there. Now public static void main, it takes string arguments. Now you are creating an object over here, student stu equal to new student, and if you want to print that, so let's say you are system.out.println, you are doing it over here, stu dot, how to get this private variable, get name. Can I call this method getName? Yes, you can call this method getName. So then this will work. Then this will work because you are calling the method which is public, and in that the object of stu which you have created, for that you are getting the name. But what it will print? Nothing. Why? Because for this object stu, you haven't specified what is the name. See, by default we haven't created any name. So far we were taking simple example in which we were giving the names. Over here we haven't done anything. So in a simplistic way, let's say if I don't use this, okay, and if I first create the instance of it or the name of it, so stu dot set name, let's say first class name, anything, right? If I'm giving some name of this object, the first name as this, and then if I'm doing system.out.println, and then stu.getName, it will print this, whatever I have set it up, whatever I have set it up. So when I call this method set name, it will go over here. First name will be go into new name, and it will set for this object. So for stu in a compiler, there will be some memory occupied with the student name for this object in compiler, well, in memory, your main memory. So when I do set name, what it does, it checks that stu.set name you have to do, right? So stu has called this method set name, and for that this variable has to be used, this dot stu name. So that means stu's stu name, I have to set it up as whatever first class name, like that it will be set up. If you create a different object and if you create a different set name, let's say you are creating another object student stu2 equal to new student, and if you do stu2 dot set name something, let's say first class name 2, then for that a different object would have been created from in memory stu2, and there it will be set. So this refers to the object that you have created, the object that you have created. Make sense? So private can be used only inside the method, or sorry, only inside the class, and outside the class if you are calling the getter and setter method. Then only then you can do that. Otherwise, no. So that means if this kind of structure I have created, and in public class main, let's say if I do something like this, student stu equals to new student, and if I do something like this, stu dot first name, sorry, whatever name or student name, anything, whichever the variable name that we have used, right, equals to John Dio, the famous name in all CV and all the things that we use generally for examples. Okay, this will throw error because you cannot use private variable outside its scope. You cannot use private variables outside its scope. Make sense?
Yeah, just a question. Like, if you're creating private variables, then why are you having the setter method?
Sorry?
Let's say, hello, am I audible?
You are not audible, Rohit. Can you type your question?
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
No, your voice is breaking a lot.
Okay, I just typed.
Yes. So the question of Rohit is why we are having a public setter method if we want to declare a private variable. Okay, I'll take a simple example of that. This is called, so whatever your sensitive data is there, okay, what do I mean by sensitive data is that whichever the data which is very, it should be hidden from some users. Okay, then they should be defined as private. That means no one should be able to directly use it. Then exactly, if we have getter and setter, then anyone can use it. Why we are doing something like this? Now, the concept of this is called encapsulation. So one of the more concept we understood when we were understanding the public, private, and protected one. And with the help of getter and setter, you can do that. Now, I'll tell you in real world scenario. Okay, in real world scenario, what happens is that, say for example, you have a DB. Okay, now you have an APIs on top of that to fetch the DB objects. Okay, now let's say you are creating jar of it. In that jar, you are specifying which methods can be called. Let's say 1 method, 2 method, and 3 method. So let's say, don't say API, just let's say understand your code is there. Okay, now in this jar, as this jar is not just like, it's not just like zip that you can open it, right? That which jar is given to you, and you are telling that, hey, you have just a method called get student roll number. That's it. Okay, just like this, you have given a method name, and setter method you have not defined, or you have not kept it into jar. So getter and setter method are there over here. Getter and setter method are there over here, but in a jar you have not kept it. Now, point is, when they call this method, it will directly call to get method to get this data. But as no setter method is defined over here for this jar, what will happen? No one will be able to call setter if you have not given them that jar in which the setter methods are defined. So in your code, actually setter methods are defined. Over here also they will be defined, but inherently it will call some API to do your work. So it's not like you are putting some getter method over here and setter method over here, and for some you are creating a jar out of it. It's not like that. You have some method getter and setter over here. For all the getters you are creating jar. Those getters will call some API of yours, and that APIs will get the data. Got it? So in that way, this jar you are giving to your downstream. Now I'll take an example of that. Okay, I'll take an example of that. You have BSc data, BSc or NSC's database. Okay, and you are the API providers to set the data for all the stock prices. So you have created getters API, you have created setter APIs, APIs which will call the methods in such a way that it will change the objects over here. Okay, now you are creating two jars out of it, or let's say if you're using .NET framework, you might be using nuggets. Am I clear? Am I clear? So some methods you have given to your downstreams. Okay, downstream in the sense someone who is using them. So let's say Zerodha, you have given this jar to them, and you have given a documentation that these are the methods that you can call. All that things will be just get up. So they will call the jar, they will use this jar directly into their project. They will call this method, which will call the API inherently, and API will call directly the data to fetch. That's it. Now Zerodha will not be able to set the data of that stock price. But let's say you have given them key, call some method to say that you have 1,000 orders over here, or 10,000 orders for some other stock, 25,000 for some other stock. So that method, let's say there are some other business logic APIs. That method will calculate that, okay, I have just 10,000 sell orders, but 50,000 buy orders. That means demand of this stock is high, while supply of the stock is low. So let's up the price. Let's say there is a simple algorithm for that, demand and supply algorithm. In BSc or NSC, whomsoever is holding this thing, okay, BSc, Sensex and all that, holding this. Okay, so with that getter and setter, just getter gets the data, setter will just say this much orders are coming up. Based upon that algorithm, business logic, or what you can say, government regulations, you define that if the ratio is up to this, you can increase the price of this, something like that. You increase and you store it into DB. No one from outside can store it into your DB. Even if these APIs are there, even if the methods are there. So generally getter and setters will be used in real life scenario like this. Not the way simply we see it right now. Right now, the way we see it is just based upon the programming concepts. Then when we go into private, when we go into industry, they'll be used in a very, very different way. But the logic behind that will remain same. It's just at a different scale it will be used. Right now, with just two classes we are understanding. In that way, in industry, those two classes will be separated into two different APIs or two different services, and then it can be created. And then that's a huge, more complex architecture furthermore, based upon API, based upon this kind of things, event driven architecture, and so many things are there. But the nutshell of that is this: how encapsulation can be used.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. So I'm just taking an example with real world scenario so that you can understand the concept why encapsulation is simply used. Because you can give in documentation that only these things you can call, otherwise not. That's a first way. Let's say inside also, you can have inside, in the sense, in one object itself, if you are not creating jars and all that things also, you can have access specifiers, something like access specifiers in a different way I'm talking about. You have some regulations that who can call these methods. So let's say you have created a set of getters method and set of setter method. Let's say someone understood that, okay, there can be some setter method like this and calls it. You don't want to give access to them, right? Then generally above your APIs, you are creating a keyword, something like authorize. In that authorize, there will be called some layers, or there will be called some functions for authorization. Okay, I'm talking about real world scenario. In that, whatever your, what you can say, login parameters are, like your class, your first name, last name, or let's say your token that you have acquired, okay, OAuth2 token or any token that you are using, all that things will be there into your authorization token, let's say, and it goes over here. Then it defines that, okay, email ID of this person is this, it belongs to this team, and this team, do I have to give access on setter or not? No, then they will not be able to call, even if you are into the same one. So in that way, you can restrict the access of setters. Right? But understanding the concept that how it can be encapsulated, we have taken a very simplistic example. Even in college or study groups or wherever you see, they will also use the simple example. But your question is correct. If we can access it, why we are creating it private? So that when we are creating it private and creating with the getter and setter method, we can have more restrictions on setter method whenever we want to put. And if setter method in documentation we haven't given them the names of those methods, they will not be able to find it out what the method name will be. Your other classes, right? And they will not be able to call the methods. Make sense? So far clear?
Yeah. Thank you.
We can only access the data through functions.
Exactly. Through the inbuilt function, inbuilt in the sense the functions which your class is providing. Okay, so in that way this is done. So such concept is called encapsulation. So see, while understanding public and private, we understand that in which way the data should be handled, and with this we understood what is inheritance for your public parent and child relationship, or super and subclass relationship. And encapsulation means data hiding, how you are hiding the data, how the security in Java is achieved. So two OOPS concept, we understood that when we are understanding private and protected data. Now, if I take, why I have taken this approach that I'm telling you, if I have taken just encapsulation first or inheritance first, in that if I have used private protected, you will not understand. If I use private protected normally and explain you that in this way it can be done, probably you will not understand. But if we take both of them together to understand a holistic concept, then it can be understood that, okay, where and how the access specifiers can be used with OOPS concepts. So everything, because everything is tightly coupled, you cannot understand each part separately, that I understand this part separately and I understand this part separately. No, these both are used together. So that's why I have taken it up in a simple example such that we can correlate all and we can use them. Okay. As we have taken two OOPS concept, let's clear all the OOPS concept. What are the two remaining? What are the OOPS concepts and what are the two remaining ones? Polymorphism, abstraction. These are the two ones which are remaining. Let's understand polymorphism. Why? Because the concept of polymorphism we already have understood. But if I take an example, you will understand where. I have created a class vehicle. In that, I have created a method, let's say public void. What was the method name? Park. A vehicle can be parked. Okay, some business logic on top of that, that this parking ID is reserved. Something like that, park ID is equal to reserved. Something like that business logic I'm doing. Okay, parking underscore ID is reserved. Somehow I'm marking it as reserved. Or let's say if I do in a proper way, how you should do this is, let's say whatever the ID you are specifying, okay, or whatever the object you are specifying, or let's say not, I would say park ID where it is. This dot is taken equals to true. So this parking spot, whatever the object you create for that is parking spot is taken. Let's say you are calling in such a way. Okay, in a simplistic way, it can be more complex, but in a simplistic way, it can be used like that. Now let's say you're calling some other method or you're using some other class car, which extends vehicle. Okay. This thing we have seen where when we were understanding protected or parent-child relationship. So when we understood parent-child relationship, I explained this thing, extend, the use of extend. Now there I told you one concept, which was this method, this class can also have void park. And here some business logic of car, I can do that. Something like if it is a car, the charges are 40 rupees per hour. If it is, let's say if I'm creating something like what you can say class two-wheeler and which extends vehicle, and in that park method, if I'm using business logic, something like the parking charges are 10 rupees per hour and the start time is this and time should be this. Now in that way, let's say I'm creating methods. Then if you see in this whole object or in this whole scenario, your park method has taken three forms: in form of vehicle, in form of car, and in form of two-wheeler. All those are valid ones. How to use them, we'll see. But when an class or that functions, anyone which uses such kind of different form, which can use such kind of different forms, then it is called polymorphism. Why? In a Greek word, poly means many and morph means forms. Most of the English words are taken from Greek words or Latin words. Latin was generally taken from Greeks. So polymorphism means many forms. So one method can take many types or many ways, and that's why it's called polymorphism. And in this way, it can be used. Now, if you want to use in your public static void main or somewhere where you are actually using these methods, how you can use? You can create the instance of vehicle, you can create the instance of car, you can create the instance of two-wheeler. Okay, and if I call the method of, so when I say instance of, that means what? I can create something like this: vehicle, let's say vh equals to new vehicle. I can do that. I can also do that vehicle, let's say car equals to new car, or vehicle new car. So over here the car has an object type car, but as its parent was vehicle, I'm creating its a type of vehicle. It can be created, it's perfectly fine. And let's say two-wheeler equals to new two-wheeler. If I want to create, it can be created. Now if I call the method something like vehicle dot park, then it will directly call which method? In vehicle method, vehicle class object. If I call car dot park, then there it will call the cars method. Correct? And it will apply 40 rupees per hour business logic, which we have specified there. Got it? Let's say in two-wheeler, there is no method called park. Let's say, just for example, we have taken example in which we have drawn it, but let's say it is not there. So even if I do two-wheeler dot park, what it will do? It will call the vehicle method, vehicle classes object, vehicle classes method called park. So in this way, we can understand that how this method park can be called, which is in polymorphism, and where it will be used, how to use. It will be used for reusability purpose. Something like you want to do some business logic into car, as I said, 40 rupees per hour, and then over there you call super method super. So when you call super in super class vehicle, whatever the park method is there, it will call. There you can apply some other business logic, something like this park or this sport has been taken. Okay, or this car has been parked, or this vehicle has been parked equals to true. So some business logic, you can put it over here. Some business logic, you can put it over here. And the reusability of all is there because you can reuse the car methods extensively, two-wheeler methods also extensively, and vehicle park also extensively, wherever the vehicles method you want to use. Correct. And in this way, you can create multiple relationship with type vehicle. Understanding these concepts are very much clear because the same concepts, I won't say same, on top of this OOPS concept only, your design principles, design patterns, I would say, is created. So understand this very clearly, that in which way I'm creating the objects, which way I'm calling, which methods is polymorphic method, and why I'm creating this.
Sir, in this, all three objects belong to vehicle class, right?
Yes.
So how can we call object the method from car class and two-wheeler?
From car class to two-wheeler, you cannot call.
So
They both
this
are separate. They both are separate. They both are not. I have not created them as public.
okay. So this all three would be going back to the same method of vehicle class.
Yes. So something like if I draw a relationship, it can be something like this. Vehicle is a type, car is one type, and two-wheeler is another type. Over here, park method can be there. Over here, park method can be there. Over here also, park method can be there. Abstraction and interface, I'm not abstract class and all that things I'm right now not talking about it. Okay. From here park to here park, you cannot call. Why? Because there is no relationship between these two, and that's why they are not created as public. They are created as a class which is extending vehicles. So from here, if you want to call this method, you can use super. Super means the superclasses method, and over here, if you use super, it will call this class. So what I was talking about in park, let's say you apply some business logic and then call super, it will call the super method. It is possible.
And for example, from public void main, if you want to call method of car class, then we have to create object of car class.
So we are creating object of car class.
And
Correct.
for example, if you have to call method of two vehicle class, then you have to create object of two vehicle class, like that.
Object of two vehicle only we are calling, right? But now if I say key, let's
But
say
why are we declaring it as super because it already inherits the properties of park vehicle class.
Yes.
The car class already
Yes,
inherits.
that's why. Something like this. You are asking the question about something like this. Why we have created the object like something like vehicle, car, let's say underscore car equals to new car. Correct?
Yeah.
If I create an object something like this car underscore car equals to new car, can I call the method of this park? Your question was that only, right?
With car object.
With car object. Now tell me your question.
I think he's asking what is the advantage of using this like vehicle car into new car. I mean, you could have directly used car, right? The second one, right?
Yeah.
So generally what we use is we have the logic of what we can say, the type of object should be what? The type of object should be what? That generally we follow. Key, the vehicle is a main class and there only what we can say car we can create. That's why. Now second thing, if I just create car, this kind of object, will it work? That's let's say your question, or let's say if I'm asking that question to you, can it be done?
The second, you mean the second line will, yeah, it will work, right?
Exactly. So that's my point. It will work. Where it will not work? Where it will not work in the sense, what will be the advantage of that and what will be the disadvantage of vehicle car or car? What should be that? Here you are defining that your object is of actually which type. If you create car, it's fine. Generally, in particular usage, we create that instances only in normal. But I wanted to specify that if you create vehicle type car, then also it's fine. In practices, in normal world, when you are writing APIs and design patterns, all the things, we follow this particular way only, and it is perfectly fine. Got it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I had the same doubt. Like, I mean, because it's the car is anyways like extending from vehicle, right? So there's no like any advantage of using the first line actually. I mean, usually we use it in interfaces actually.
Exactly. But see,
Here there's no like,
exactly.
yeah.
Why I have taken is that even if you create this of type, because I'm explaining the polymorphism, that's why that a car is of type vehicle, and that's why if you create an instance of vehicle type, it's fine.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay.
Here, your car or your what we can say, your two-wheeler and a car, your vehicles, any vehicles is taking two forms that can be understood by this vehicle one. Let's say if I'm creating vehicle, an object of car, vehicle and two-wheeler, that means your object have taken two forms of vehicles and car types, car and two-wheeler. So it can take multiple forms with multiple methods. So that I just wanted to explain, and that's why I have taken. But if you, in general practice, when you are writing code in your company or somewhere, you do not call the methods or do not call the create class like this. You'll always create the class like this only, so that it is perfectly specified that it is of which type. But if you do like that and you want to show that it can follow the polymorphism, yes, it can. That's what my idea was.
So the concept of polymorphism is only like it's like related to this only, or it was? I thought it was like related to the interfaces we use, right? There
Yes.
actually we use polymorphism. I mean, C polymorphism.
There also. That's why in a very first statement I said the interfaces, or that I'm not right now talking about.
Okay. No, I was not okay. I was not aware of this. Like we can see polymorphism here as well. Okay.
And also the way interfaces we can use, or the way abstract classes that we can use, they both are also different. Are you getting my point? Like you can in interface and in abstract class also, you can have the same mechanism that you can have methods which are there into your interface, let's say interface, let's say vehicle, and you can use over here. But in interface method, you will not do any business logic. Over here, as I said, with superclass, you can call this method, and over here you can have some business logic. Over here, you can put some business logic. In interfaces, you cannot. Okay. Correct. And even in the abstract classes, you cannot. It will just to define which methods are there.
Okay.
And extra methods, you can put it over here, put it up over here as well. And when you are creating interface, right, at that time also, we generally do not create it with generally in the sense in nomenclature or in industry that I'm talking about. Let's say this I'm creating as interface. I will not create of type vehicle. Correct. It will be type of car only, which I want to use. I'll just say class car implements vehicle, class two-wheeler implements vehicle instead of extends. And in vehicle, I cannot put any business logic. I can just say this is the public park method or public calculate parking fare method, something like that. It's just definition that this method will be there. That's it. So there's a fine difference between the way interfaces and abstract classes can be used and the way interfaces abstract classes can be seen with polymorphism. Over here, our polymorphism is kind of like our object or our class has taken many forms. I have taken example, or I have said something like our method have taken many forms because those methods, I have kept it into different classes, and actually I'm using those methods in a different way. But in a concept of polymorphism, it can be considered, or it can be said, that your class car and two-wheeler have many forms. Correct?
Yeah.
And that's why that's called, in a different way, polymorphism. Now you might think that where it can be used, right? So I was talking about, like, in your, what I can say, your design patterns generally follow all these OOPS concept very fundamentally, like abstract factory method, and all those things. Let's say not just those, design pattern, builder pattern, everywhere. If you understand this OOPS concept, understanding those will be very simple. That okay, because of this kind of relationship with the classes I have created, this kind of methods I can extend. And those design patterns are also following some real world scenario. So if you mug up the design patterns, you'll forget. But if you understand the real world scenario, then you'll always remember why such kind of pattern was there. Second thing, generally in industry or interview questions, for the freshers, they will ask some design pattern question. But little bit of experience guys, let's say 1 or 2 years of experience guys, they will not ask design patterns in interview generally. They will ask low level concepts design and all the things. Why? Because in general, design patterns are not much used. Much used when I say, why? Because design patterns tightly couple your classes and objects with each other in terms of relationships, generally. So unless you are solving some very specific business related query or problem, which can be easily solved with design pattern, but with business logic it can be difficult. Unless that, generally business design patterns, builder design patterns and other design patterns, we do not use much. And that's why in industry people will not ask you exactly that write down the code for this design pattern. They will try to understand that do you know and do you understand the concepts of object oriented fundamentals. Or let's say they ask you to create, let's say, some example, he design logging. So whatever the logging you do in your day-to-day programming, if you have to create a design logger problem, then how do you? So obviously when you're designing logging, some design pattern you have to create, or on your own you have to follow some object-oriented relationship between the classes. So when they ask this question to you, they will see which kind of classes you have created, which kind of interfaces you have created, which polymorphism or some other type of object oriented fundamentals, how you have used it, how encapsulation have you used it. If you can create those very well, that means you can write it down some code in industry which is very much useful to them. You'll not write a crappy code. That is a perfect, in actually Indian culture, actually in Ayurveda, there is a proverb like everything is everything. And why I'm taking is over here is because the same concept I'll use it to explain multiple things, at least twice, and they are this. Everything should be taken in or should be considered in some quantity. If you take elixir too much, then also it's a poison, and if you take poison in some quantity, then also it can be elixir. That's a very famous thing in Ayurveda. Now, why I'm defining this over here? I'll take a simple example. If you create very tight coupling, when I say tight coupling means if you use some design pattern which very tight coupling, what will happen? whenever you want to change some design problems or whenever you want to change some classes over here, okay, your change of the class will be of 2 lines, but it will start affecting rest of the classes, and at the end your 1 day's task can be completed in, let's say, 10 days. So tight coupling. The same way the loose coupling can be there. What is loose coupling? Generally, if there is no relationship between any class generally, and you are using each class, or you are creating each class as public, and you are using each class by creating anywhere, somewhere in any other classes, and you can use this relationship in a very complex way. It will give you flexibility of code, but the protection of your code will be less. And because of that, 2 lines of code will take 1 day, let's say, for testing, deployment, and all that things. It will. But when you want to solve some specific business problem in which some relationships should not use other classes and all such kind of complex scenario you have to solve, then this will also go in a toss. Why? Because already exists a relationship in that you cannot do or obtain such kind of thing. So the point was that too much tight coupling is also not good. Too much loose coupling is also not good. You have to create your design such a way that it will be tight coupled wherever. Tight coupled in the sense probably properly following all the design patterns and properly giving access specifiers and all that things. So you can use that, and you can use some type of loose coupling as well wherever they are useful. So you have to find the blend of that, and that comes the blend, or where to use which one, and not blindly follow some principle. That will come with a practice, and that is used everywhere. Another example, if I take, probably in colleges we might have studied normalization. Okay, when I'll take normalization, I'll convert it. But if you remember the same concept, the 1NF, 2NF, 3NF, then BCNF, 5NF, 6NF, I think till that normalization can be done on SQL. But what is the exact normalization? Or in industry, which kind of normalization it's used? It's 3NF or BCNF, 4NF. That's it. Too much loose coupling is also not useful, or too much lenient normalization is also not useful. Too much strict normalization or decoupled normalization is also not useful. It creates problem. This also creates problem. So finding the blend or in between and creating your design something like that which follows this is useful, and that comes with a practice. Or we take some examples and take you to that. So whenever we'll take this example of normalization in SQL, I'll give an example of that. The same kind of things, like how do you design your microservices? The same pattern will be useful over here. So that's why I have taken this verb, that I'll take this famous verb of Ayurveda and try to take or try to explain you that how it will be used in our day-to-day life as well. We cannot take anything too much rigidly. Either it can be loose coupling or very tight coupling, anything. Right? And that design principle or that thing is applicable everywhere. SQL, microservice architecture, design patterns that you are using, or in day-to-day life. You cannot be too lenient, you cannot be too strict. That's it. Right? So this is what generally in industry people follow. And to understand that which kind of concepts you'll use, they will ask you questions and find it out that are you following such kind of patterns. And that's why when you're going into the industry, probably they will ask you some concepts, And when you go into the industry after 2-3 years, when you try to switch, they will not ask you concepts, they will ask you directly design logger. And we want to see how object-oriented fundamentals you are using. Got my point? So in that way, we should be understanding the concepts and use them. Okay, so this was something from the industry. Now let's take a different example. So let's say we have understood polymorphism, the way our class, different classes, car, two-wheeler, can take a form of vehicle, or I would say a vehicle is taking multiple forms of car, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, and so many things, right? So that is called polymorphism. Now, the remaining principle of abstraction. Something I told, but something I'll again pick it up. Abstract classes, interfaces, abstraction, everything together. Everything together. Now, abstract class or abstract method you can create. What is abstract? Keyword ABSTRACT. Abstract. Generally, abstract classes are for design purpose. What is design purpose? Or I would say definition purpose. What is definition purpose? That means over here, you cannot create object of this class. A class abstract vehicle. I cannot create a vehicle equals to new vehicle. New vehicle V equals to new vehicle. I cannot create this. Okay, what I have to do is I have to inherit this class, something like car extends vehicle, and then I'll create an object of car, and then I'll create object of car, not object of vehicle. Again, object of vehicle will create an error. Then I'll create an object of car. Why we are creating such kind of design? So generally, abstract classes are for design or definition purpose, something like what this vehicle class should have. And vehicle class will have which kind of methods, correct? This way it can be. Abstract methods will not have body. When I say body, that means it will not have any business logic. In that, you will not write any code. I'll take an example, but I'm just taking a simple understanding. I'm giving you an understanding. For example, let's say I'm creating a class abstract class. Again, I'm taking the same example, okay? Vehicle. In that, let's say I'm creating public abstract void park. I'm parking some vehicle over here. Now, over here, if you see, I'm completing the method. So that is called abstract method. An abstract method will not have body. Starting, opening, closing parenthesis, no, it will not have. So I'm defining that whatever the class, abstract class, vehicle, whichever the classes will extend this vehicle can create a park method. Okay, can create park method. In abstract class, can you have regular methods? Anyone from your college days remember this? Okay, something like public void print challan or price. Can I do that? Parking price, okay, something like that. Whatever the price has come for parking. Can I do that? Yes, it's allowed. You can do that. Okay, you can do that. How this method or how this class will be used? Again, as I was telling, class car extends your class vehicle, and the same way you can use it. But in your main class, wherever the public static void main is there, you cannot create vehicle object. Vehicle car equals to new car. You cannot. You have to use car underscore car equals to new car. Make sense? And if you call underscore car dot print parking price, something like that, whatever method we have called, then it will call the vehicles method. Why? Because in print parking car, in car, there is no such method. It is calling the super method only. It can be fine. Because I told you when I was explaining inheritance, that if this object doesn't have this method, then it will try to find it out this method into superclass. And in superclass, if it is there, it will print it. So in that way, you're abstracting some information in the sense the definition of the class that you are putting as an abstraction into abstract class. That is called abstraction. You can have abstract class or you can have abstract methods as well. Now, in a similar way, an interfaces can be defined. Interface and abstract class will have a minor difference. What interface is? Interface is you are creating that what a vehicle class should have, just like abstract class, but it will not have any method which will have a body. Just like we have created print parking spot or print parking price. Such kind of vehicle class had when it was abstract. But if it is interface, it will not have. In interface, there will be only definition, something like if I'm creating interface vehicle, okay, I can have only public void park and complete. It does not have body. Public void print parking price or ticket price or anything that you want to define. Okay, so in this way I can just define the methods in the class that this way this class will have. And interfaces are much more useful in design patterns. How you are creating the interfaces, abstract class is not. Interfaces are much more useful in design patterns because you are defining what a subclass should have. I'm talking about subclass. Why? Because right now I have not taken word which can be used furthermore. That's why with the understanding of abstraction, I'm calling this as a subclass. Generally, it will not be called subclasses. It will be called other classes which will implement interfaces. That means if I've created interface vehicle, if I'm using, let's say, class car, then car will implement vehicle. Got it? And in whatever the method in vehicle I had park and all that things, I can put it up over here with body. Body in the sense, whatever the business logic I want to put. And it is possible. The same way, just like we know that interfaces or abstract class, they are almost similar. You cannot create an instance of that. You cannot create object of that. Is that clear? Now there are furthermore some differences. I want you guys to check it out as in a lesson or type of thing. And if you are aware of C++ and Java, they both are almost following the same coding pattern. So it's fine. But what I want you guys to do is try to write some different type of relationship, just like I have used vehicle. You can use student teacher, just like I was telling, right? in an institution, the user can be one class and the type of user can be three: admin, teacher, and student. Right, now this relationship you can create with interfaces or abstract or with a polymorphism. Try to write some code and do hands-on, something like you are creating some objects over here, trying different methods over here, trying to see if I can call and what you can say superclass methods. If I'm not defining it as a superclass, if I'm creating as an interface, in which way I can call all these things. All that things, try it out. Write down the code and try it out. And if you have doubt, do ping me or do mail me. Okay, or keep it ready for the next session. We can have a debugging session together. So with this, our main OOPS concepts are clear. Main OOPS concepts are clear. What is subclass? What is inner class? What is polymorphism? What is other OOPS concepts? And rest of the things. Some of the things we will use it, or we will understand whenever we will use it. Or some of the things are very simple to understand. So wherever we'll start taking them up in design patterns or in low level design, we'll explain, and those will be self-explanatory. So at that time we'll take it up if it is necessary. Okay. So with this, we are wrapping up today's session.